And welcome back, guys. You might be wondering why I'm wearing a badly ironed dress shirt today. The reason for that is simple. My ChessBase course is finally out, my second one, in fact, about the King's Indian, a complete repertoire from the black side against all moves basically except for one e4. So against c4, d4, knight f3 is the main focus, and you can also play most of the recommendations against some of white's sidelines on the first move. It was a huge project, and I'm really thrilled that it's finally out. It's my second course for ChessBase after my one knight f3 repertoire, which got released last year. And I'm quite happy with the work overall. It was quite a huge project because making the King's Indian playable in many directions is not always so easy with the engines. I mean, they are quite strong and they can make it work, but then to make it work for a human as well is what I was struggling with in many of the lines, because there is so much theory, and my whole approach of the course was to make the effort of learning everything as little as possible. And I think I managed to do that in most of the directions quite well, but in some of them I struggled quite a lot. Still, overall, I'm quite satisfied, as I've already said a couple of times. And I think there are a couple of things which make the course quite interesting. And I just want to show you a couple of directions of my course. Of course, if you like those directions, then you can check it out. Also on the website, before you buy the course, you can, I believe, see some of my recommendations. They should be written there. I think it's the most important that we focus on some of the main lines. Just to get one thing said as well, I have now in my database, it is 51 theory files, and there is one bonus. There is a bonus section as well. First of all, which I think is also quite helpful for the average player, is one video about the most important strategical ideas of the whole opening, which was like a 20-25 minute video at the end of which I recorded at the end of the course, sort of summarizing all of the major strategical things which you should take care of in the King's Indian, playing it from the black side. And there were also some model games after that, which are also always part of my courses typically. And but as I said, 51 theory files which you can look forward to. All right, so what in fact is the King's Indian? If some of you guys are new to chess, it is this opening for black, with probably the biggest downside being, as we can already see now, that white gains the center in this opening. White has all of the pawns in the center right here. Could even put another one with f4. Funnily enough, I had a game like this in the Croatian League, where I've also played my recommendation, which caught my opponent off guard, and I got a very promising position later on. So this is the first thing which we need to be aware if we play the King's Indian. Obviously, some people are going to say, well, I don't like to play without space. Then the King's Indian is probably not the right opening for you. Just going to be honest here. But what black does have in the King's Indian always is counterplay on the king side, because black is always intending to then break in the center with e5 or sometimes c5, and black does get a lot of counterplay in the center, sometimes on the queen side as well, but mostly we're looking at the king side. And the most typical structure which we can see in the King's Indian is generally something like this. Let's just say this, the old classical mainline, which I'm not recommending in my course, just to say that, where the black pawn chain is looking at in this direction and the white pawn chain is looking in this direction. And what I often tell my students, especially if they're not on the master level just yet, I think that this is generally quite a good indicator on which side you are playing. If the pawn chain is looking towards this direction, then it's mostly an indicator that black should play on that side. And as it is for white now, white is typically playing on the queen side. But of course, I'm drifting off here a little bit. I wanted to focus more on my course and not about the strategical ideas. You can watch my other videos for that. In the course, what makes it quite interesting, I think, is that I'm always recommending knight a6 systems. And this is quite practical in many instances. First of all, in basically all of the variations where white puts the pawns to e4, d4, c4, and goes knight c3, then we are ready to play this bishop g7, short castle, d6, and knight a6 system. And this is probably the only system which is playable against all different white setups. which is not always the case with e5. I mean, in most cases, black can play short castle and e5, but there are quite a few things which white can do then, and many different possibilities. And with knight a6, it seems like it's first of all gonna catch our opponent off guard in many cases, because it's not one of the main lines. And against this line specifically, the knight on a6 is typically quite well placed, because the pawn on c7 is often protected, and therefore we never really need to worry about those exchanges anymore on d8, because now the knight on a6 is going to be very well placed. Knight d5 is never going to be dangerous anymore, because c7 is going to be protected. And of course, also with the knight on a6, we are preparing sometimes to take on d4, and then we can put the knight to c5 later on. And of course, if white goes d5, we're happy to place the knight on c5 anyway. So these are just some general principles about the knight a6 line. Now, if we dive a bit deeper into some of the whole ideas with transpositions, as I've mentioned earlier, for example, after bishop e2, short castle, bishop e3, which is another very topical line nowadays, we still go knight a6, and white has a couple of different options to going knight f3 here, but we have already now a transposition to some of the other lines which we can get, for example, with this move order. We also go knight a6 and then bishop e3. So I think that some of the workload is decreasing in that regard, and some of the lines are not as theoretically debated and not as forcing as some of the lines in the main line. Like, for example, I was of course looking into many different possibilities here for black. Like h6 is of course a very interesting system. E takes d4 is very interesting, but it seems like all of that tends to be quite forcing sometimes. And I think that in those knight a6 systems, it's generally a bit less forcing than some of the others. Obviously, this is not all we're looking at in the course. Like, there are many different sidelines. Like, for example, the London is going to be played quite often nowadays. The Fianchetto-Systems. Actually made a separate video about that. If you want to check that out, I will put an info card right now. Just another direction which I'm giving in the course is here, this system with rook e8 and bishop d7, which is also still quite a rare line. Nowadays it's picking up slowly, but these are often my recommendations, to pick a more solid line sometimes, where you don't need to remember as much and hopefully are able to surprise the opponent. This is one of the good examples, I believe, where black is trying to prepare e5, or sometimes has ideas of queen c8 and bishop h3. There are some lines where I'm going to be honest in the course where maybe black is not fully equalizing in the very end, but I'm only giving that like if I'm sure that, first of all, it's going to be very difficult for our opponent to even reach there, and secondly, even if the ending position is still going to be playable, like it's not going to be some position where we just have to suffer. Yeah, I think this is everything I wanted to say. So we have d4 covered, of course, we have c4 covered, and knight f3. This is maybe the last thing I wanted to mention, why I've always liked the King's Indian, because you don't need to worry about the different move orders. Like, you can always play knight f6, and then g6, bishop g7, d6, and short castle. This is basically everything you need to know about the first few moves in the King's Indian, which is not always possible in other openings. Like, for example, if you're trying to play the Grunfeld with black, which is this opening, very good opening, just to have that said. But you're gonna face difficulties if white starts with knight f3, because now after knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, if bishop g7, now white can go for the King's Indian, and d5 might transpose to the Grunfeld later on, but typically this is leading to some other possibilities for white. And the same often applies, for example, if you want to play the Nimzo Indian with black, then what do you do against c4? Because after knight f6, knight c3, if e6, white does not have to go for d4, they can go for the Mykonos. And this is quite simple with the King's Indian, and therefore it's a very nice opening for amateurs in specific, I would say. But what I try to also make work in this course is just to give variations which I, at the end of the day, will also play myself, which is generally my attitude towards making those courses. So you can check the course out. I've linked it in the video description down below. Some of you guys have already asked me quite often, when is it finally being released? And it is here before Christmas. So in case you are looking for a gift for one of your friends or some other people, then maybe they would be happy about that. Who knows? Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you found this helpful. And yeah, that was it for today. See you guys soon.